welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm your host, Bernie, and today Doug is taking a nap, I think, in the back seat of the RV as we continue our horror movie road trip across the U.S. So we're a number of episodes in. We've logged a lot of miles. We've gone through many estates. We've talked about The Exorcist in Washington, D.C., about Jeepers Creepers in Florida, of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in Texas, Halloween in Illinois, and now as we're making our way up from Texas past Oklahoma, we are now going into Kansas. And fortunately for me, with Doug taking a nap, I have two amazing hosts joining me on this RV trip on this leg, and I'm going to have a little bit of a lead foot as we try to get through this part of the country. Pete, thanks for joining us on this extra mile here that we're just continuing to undergo this horror map.
Yes, thank you for picking me up, Bernie. I'm just going to speak in low tones so we don't wake up Doug, because he's been doing a lot of driving on this adventure. So we want to make sure that he's well rested when we get to the end of our journey. Thank you.
That's right. And that many movies, as we've talked about, Pete was kind enough to stick out his leg, his thumb, and we picked him up like every good hitchhiker in all these horror movies that we're talking about are picked up, because of course they pose no threat to us. Pete, you haven't been the threat, you've been an asset, so it's great to have you on. And Andrew, special guest. I don't know, your horror experience, you're a walking horror Wikipedia, you're the monster movie maniac extraordinaire. Andrew, thanks for joining us on this episode again.
Thank you for having me.
So hopefully you've had a good time, Andrew, as we've talked about all of these movies, and you have, I think you said you're probably more of a horror movie collector, but I think with that means you've seen a lot of horror movies, and certainly I think in our discussions more than Pete and I have.
Yeah, I think it's clinically proven. It's been way too many horror movies.
Scientifically proven as well.
All right, so we're going to get into a fun one here, one that as we were talking before we started hitting recording, that none of us have seen, but I think we're kind of excited to talk about something that we have something to talk about. We're on a podcast, for Christ's sakes. I mean, come on, the three of us are going to say something. So we're going to Kansas and we're going into Near Dark. All right, Pete, I'm going to start with you. We know that neither of us, the three of us, none of us have seen this movie, but I think I'm at least aware of this movie, and I got the sense that you were aware of Near Dark as well.
I am aware of it. I propose a unique idea here. What if we just let silence ride for the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then our listeners can kind of just fill it in, whether they're driving in the car somewhere, walking down, the street with their earbuds, and they can kind of, this is audience participation time. Of course, we'll never know what they contribute, but I mean, I'm just thinking out of the box here, because we haven't seen this movie, so there's really not much that we can say about it other than, yes, I am aware of Near Dark, Bill Paxton, directed by Catherine Bigelow. I don't know if this was her directorial debut or not. Second, okay. Bernie's holding up the two fingers, not the middle finger. Well, actually,
her first movie was Loveless with William Dafoe, and I think she had co-director credit on that one. So this was essentially her first solo directing gig, but she had some directing experience under her belt.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's about all I've got. Yeah, I would like to see this. I think we all have said that this is something that we are looking forward to seeing. It is out of print, so getting our hands on a copy will take some ingenuity, but I think Andrew is already making use of his ingenuity to land himself one. So I'll let him kind of jump in at this point, and he can give his thoughts on Near Dark.
I did not originally hear about this movie in any previous time until we started this road trip. And I have never been so excited to see an out-of-print 80s movie in my life. I mean, whoever edited this trailer really deserves an award if they can get me to buy an out-of-print copy of a movie which hasn't probably seen daylight in the past decade. By the way, it must have high demand, because right now, the cheapest prices that you're seeing on eBay and Amazon are $60 to $70 for the Blu-ray, $35-$40 for the DVD. Even the VHS copy is going for $20.
It's big money. That's big money. That's out of print money. But I think so I haven't seen it either. I did watch the trailer, and Andrew, you're right. The trailer looked amazing. It looks like a movie that if there's an audience participation piece here, Pete, it's probably the audience yelling at us for going this far into this many movies on a horror movie road trip and not having seen Near Dark. Because I know Lost Boys and Fright Night were released in the mid 80s. I think it was like 85, 87 respectively. This came out around like right after that. So there was a little bit of a popularity with vampire films. And in this case, having seen the trailer, it seems like Catherine Bigelow, the director, took the idea of the Western and sort of like the Texarkana, Southwest, perpetual dusty road, and layered on the idea of vampires. But something that we've talked about in other episodes, where Andrew, you and I have an affinity for Rob Zombie and specifically Devil's Rejects. It seems like this movie, at least from the trailer, follows a family of vampires who are moving along, feeding, and happen to pick someone up or turn someone and are giving him a week to see if he survives in their family dynamic. So everything about the movie seems interesting. The casting, Patton Lance Henriksen as seems like the patriarch of this vampire family. And the one of the other Marines from Aliens is in there as well. I forget her name, but she was the one with the really big gun and the even like bigger ego that was just in Aliens and was taking them on, and in the end wound up sacrificing herself in order to buy the rest of them some time. She's in it as one of the vampires too in Near Dark. Everything about it seems like a movie we should watch, guys. And I think, Andrew, in the small preview I did see, after that there was like a 5-minute documentary about it. It seems like there's some rights issues that have happened with the movie, and I think that's why the out of print status of the Blu-ray, the DVD, have made them more in demand and more costly. But luckily you were able to find something for less than 3 figures.
Yeah, once it got up to 4 figures, I think I would pass and wait until it comes out of the Disney archive.
So if you're listening and you're a little frustrated with us, I think it's fair to say, I'll speak for all of us, I get it. We should have seen this movie. But you know what? This is the great thing, is that going through this, there are movies that we know are dyed-in-the-wool classics like Exorcist, and more modern day classics like You're Next, or some movies like Halloween that are just they're on the Mount Rushmore. But we're discovering new movies as we all kind of figure out how we discovered these movies, how we saw them for the first time. The first time we saw The New Daughter or Terror at 10 Killer, those are moments we'll never forget. So this is one of those movies that for sure will be a movie that will be on my to watch list in the near future.
And I'm a little bit embarrassed for us as the Fan2Fan podcast that this one is slipped through, because you would think, I think we built this to having 3 to 4 hosts on at a time, and we, anyone that's listened to a previous episode understands that Doug is not a horror fan. So chances are he was not going to have seen it. But going by like the Swiss cheese model, where you think that we'd have it all covered so that a movie would not slip through all the holes, but in this case we have failed the Swiss cheese model. We have failed ourselves, and I feel a little ashamed, but in this world, in this land, and on this road trip, we don't have a whole lot of time to just keep looking in the rearview mirror, Bernie. So keep on driving. Where we heading to next?
All right, we're moving on up. We're going up to Nebraska, and hopefully a movie that we have something more to say about, the Near Dark. So we're going to bring in a classic literary writer in this genre, Stephen King's Children of the Corn. So Andrew, I'm going to start with you on this one. We've talked about Stephen King before. He's popped up quite a few times on this map. Carrie, and I feel like he's come up a few times, either movies that have put him on the map or movies that we've talked about that we would replace it. Everything from like Cat's Eye to Creepshow. I don't know. I feel like we've discussed the entire Stephen King movie catalog, good, bad, or ugly. But Children of the Corn, Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, for better or for worse, Stephen King will have a lot of references. I think he does a great job with like horror topics with like Americana, like sprinkled throughout the entire US. So, he's definitely is deserving to pop up several times during this road trip. Children of the Corn, it's always had a special place in my heart. This was probably one of the first ones I got, exposed to. as a kid. And I was like, oh, I see friends inside this movie. It's the story that Stephen King has depicted in the movie. I don't think necessarily there's anything about the movie itself, like the way that it's shot, the pacing of it, the actors that are necessarily stand out, but that story is just really strong. It does a good job of introducing the creatures, the villain, the evil in it in a way that's not too flashy or showy, not high FX budget, but just like movement underneath the dirt, shadow work. I think possessed children, the simple stuff that's really classic and keeps it very approachable as it age. I guess what was the late 70s or
I think it has Peter Horton and Linda Hamilton, but I want to say this was post Terminator Linda Hamilton.
Yeah, this was like 83 or 84.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I'm surprised this one hasn't been remade yet. But I mean, I think it's a great, especially for the middle of the country, grain belt example. It's a great movie. Still, super creepy. Whenever you have like possessed children, oh come on, I'm gonna kick myself for not remembering the name of all the kids that were alien kids. That
Village of the Damned.
Village of the Damned. Thank you. Very Village of the Damned-esque. And maybe like a splash of Lord of the Flies in there too. But yeah, good movie. It definitely has my thumbs up.
Pete?
Yeah, this was one, again, another early cable, well, I guess not so early, it was 83, 84. But certainly coming of age cable, rated R movie as a kid. I give it credit because I think it still captured a bit of that gritty tone. Although, once you get into like 84, 85, I think you started to see a lot of horror movies had a little more of that sheen and gloss to it that for me kind of took it away from, when you're looking at your early Friday the 13th that were shot on location in New Jersey. And, and then when they started moving to California and shooting on sound stages, it lost a little of that luster for me. So to have the location shots here, I thought was very effective. I never loved the ending in this movie though. There's something about it. I think I was hoping for more. I mean, I definitely get like the creepy kids, always a great touch because who's not disturbed by, especially that lead was Malachi. Was that the character's name?
So there were the two. There was Malachi, who was the right hand man, and then there was Isaac, who was the more
that's right.
Bible thumping like lead cultist kid.
Yes. Malachi, that was Courtney Gaines, right, from Can't Buy Me Love, and
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking Isaac. Isaac was the one because he had like the very needed parted hair. He looked like he could have been 40 years old, even though he was just a kid. So that was disturbing in and of itself.
Yeah, he definitely had that old kid look, like the kid that could go buy beer.
Right.
If it makes you feel better, both of you guys are right. He was actually a 25-year-old actor who had.
There you go.
I'm not sure what it is, but there's some sort of condition where you don't age as much, and he did have that. So he was 25 years old, which maybe explains a little bit of his maturity. And yeah, that there's something about his presence where he does feel either like a really talented kid actor, or in this case, someone who could buy beer. Yes.
Yeah. So I think the only thing that really, I guess, was the letdown for me was that it kind of teased the whole like he who walks behind the rose type thing, and like Andrew said, you've got like the moving earth. Reminded me a little bit of at the end of the Thing, where the thing's like underneath the ice and it's kind of the floorboards are shooting up. But then, I mean, other than that big explosion and that not very good animation, where you kind of see like the demon creature entity in like in that fire cloud. I think I was looking for a little more. I wanted like more like a monster or some kind of creature effect to be present in the movie, and when it wasn't there, it was kind of like, all right, well.
The one thing that will definitely persuade you otherwise is watching Children of the Corn 3, which takes place in New York. The special effects in that movie is my go-to for just terrible special effects. There's this wonderful scene at the very end. There's no spoilers, right? So this monster manifest evil that is typically seen underneath the dirt finally breaks through the dirt and is this claymation kind of knockoff graboid. And there's this one scene where it picks up one of the protagonists, and you can see the claymation worm pick her up, and she turns into a Barbie doll, and her non-articulated legs kick in, and maybe a second or two, but it is a wonderful cautionary tale.
I'm sold.
Bernie, talking about this movie is more fun than watching it because I think it's hot garbage.
Oh, okay.
I really dislike this movie, and I'm not going to say in comparison to, like, we've talked about it, and I think it was on the first episode of this road trip, Andrew, you were talking about I have such a tactile memory, the double VHS cassette set for it, and how you would see that with the rubber band tied around it at Blockbuster. So when I think of like Misery, The Shining, Creepshow, It, some of those early Stephen King movies compared to this, and Pete, I think you were getting to like where my pseudo strong feelings about this movie are. It just feels like a lazy movie. The casting is a bit lazy, and I remember watching this early on and thinking this isn't interesting. Like, I get the commentary about driving through middle America and how every other station is either, they play both kinds of music, Blues Brothers, country and Western. And, it's essentially a preacher, talking about fire and brimstone as Peter Horton and Linda Hamilton are driving through, and when they get into this town. So I don't know if Stephen King has very strong feelings about religion, or is a fan of the institution, or has some commentary in, I'm not sure when he wrote the story, but Pete, you and I come from an era where like Jimmy Swaggart and the televangelist. So I don't know if there was some commentary about that, about the idea of religion as an institution. But some of the things are there, and it's interesting in the movie. I just think it falls flat because he who walks in the rose and the kids thing, it just doesn't feel like it was fully baked. And I don't know if it needed a better director, or if it's another case where the story, the written story is more interesting than the adaptation. But this does feel like one that I don't think it's gone into space yet in the sequels that they've made from it. They've obviously gone to New York.
There's like 20 sequels to this, aren't there?
Yeah, but I think there might be 6 sequels to this.
That's a lot of corn. There's a lot
of corn.
I think 8.
Wow. I would like to think
9.
that while the first one did not make an impression with me, that the concept is strong, and I hope it's only gotten better in time as people have made more movies, and I would imagine modernized the idea of a cult and the idea of possession and this whole thing about, I don't know, there feels like there's a lot of good stuff to be mined here. I didn't see it in this version.
I'm wondering, because this is a short story by Stephen King. I'm wondering if this suffered from there not being enough content, maybe, and that they were trying to stretch this out to like feature length, which, it can be done. I'm a big fan of The Mist, but that's obviously many years later. I think there was Stephen King certainly around this time was very hit or miss in movie adaptations. You kind of needed like the really bold director of like someone like Stanley Kubrick with The Shining. I love Salem's Lot as well, which was more of a TV miniseries. But there was a lot of his stuff early on it was not very good. Carrie being another exception, but it seemed like it was very hit or miss. And I don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering if it being a short story, our enjoyment of it suffered because there wasn't enough there for them to adapt to a feature length.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. When you have to kind of take the story on from King, like, Kubrick, he had enough source material, but he differed in the way that he expressed the story. And it really, it takes someone with the same, not only skill level, but, the same kind of desire to see the story unfold, to really kind of bring it to fruition. There's a lot of Stephen King, even though like the longer books that are just, terribly adapted, because it's trying to inject something that's overriding the source material, or I don't know, like even some of the ones where King is actively involved in are, not as strong as the books. His books are really strong. And so, yeah, I definitely see the short story. Like The Mangler, I think, is another good short story of his that just hasn't had a good film adaptation to it. And when you're basing it off of that few pages, it really requires a lot of, I guess, filler.
Absolutely. And like Pete said, the right director to be able to bring in all those Americana, like post World War II, some of his short stories, and it's been a while since I've read them, but they do feel like they were like inspired, like the birth by all of those pulp stories that were released or in the 40s and into the 50s, where you like EC and Tales from the Crypt. Andrew, I know like you're a big fan of those, that he was very much creating versions of that he probably grew up reading himself. And there's a magic in the short story, but then without the right person to take all of those things and kind of like, bring those into that short story and add on to it. Because I want to say Christine was also a short story, but it's a movie that, at least for me, compared to Children of the Corn, seems to be more effective. And maybe it's in the casting and in the direction and Carpenter, but at least there feels like that was a short story that still held its own compared to this or The Mangler.
Maybe it just needed to be set in Maine. Maybe the problem was that it was in Nebraska.
Either that or
got too far away from Ground Zero King.
Or the right answer to most of these is if it could have been directed by John Carpenter, it may have been at least a little better. Maybe. There you go.
I would have loved to see the Carpenter Children of the Corn.
Just for the soundtrack alone, that would have been amazing.
Just for a couple of Dean Cundy shots where like that, like that strobe effect on like the headlights that he, just perfected. Like you just know you're watching a John Carpenter.
You can even have it take place after the fog, where it's Tom Atkins and Jamie Lee Curtis driving away from the coast into the middle of the country. Just keep the same characters going and just like mash up the fog with the literary world of Stephen King. Why not?
And they've got Stevie Wayne's son with them, and he gets him roped into the cult, and all hell breaks loose.
That's right. There's still hope. I think all of them are probably alive. Maybe we can do this still. There we go. All right, so we're going to move up towards the Canadian border a little bit closer here as we move into South Dakota, into a movie that, seeing it on the map here, was the first time I had any connection to this movie. So I don't know if we're going to have a lot to say about it, or maybe not much, but we'll all find out very soon when we start talking about Badlands. So Andrew, any comments on Badlands, starring Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen? And I did see Warren Oates on there, so at least there were actors that were recognizable to me, even though I've never seen the movie. So have you?
Yeah, I saw it as part of my homework for the road trip, just because there's big names in it. I saw reviews and remarks saying it's a notable piece of film history. So I dove in, and it really, to me, it's not a horror film. It's one of those that it checks off a box of a state that doesn't have many horror films. As a matter of fact, I feel like it's also in the wrong state, because it's named after the Badlands in Montana and not South Dakota. They travel across state lines while traveling there. I think you can say that actually probably by another one that we're going to get to on this leg, but it's following the two lead characters as they flee a string of murders, and they're just trying to stay ahead of the law. It's interesting. I don't think really, but I mean the pacing's a little slow, so modern day audiences might have a hard time kind of really being captivated by it. But yeah, I don't think really I have anything notable.
I saw the preview for it, just to at least have some sense for the movie, and it did have that Bonnie and Clyde feel to it. But my God, there was talk about a nihilistic viewpoint. Some of the things that they reveal in the trailer with Martin Sheen's character, I'm not sure if he's supposed to be, I don't know, there was sort of this anarchist type feel where maybe you even got the sense that he could be a veteran that has gone through some sort of trauma and is, kind of taking it out on the law and the institution of government. So I don't know if any of that is in the movie, Andrew, but that's at least what came off apparent to me in the trailer. Pete, have you seen this?
1 for 3 on this leg of the trip. So yeah, this was completely off my radar. Other than I did look up, this was apparently a hit with Roger Ebert at the time. He gave it 4 stars. He actually raved about Terrence Malick's direction and seemed to really enjoy this. So like I said, that I was just completely unaware of this movie, other than the title is appropriate for a horror movie set in the state. But as Andrew said, it's not, I guess, not really a horror movie. So that's what I got to add to the comments.
There's a classification like Natural Born Killers. I wouldn't really consider a horror movie, although I mean, there's a lot of aspects that are, probably more related to horror. I always have this hard time of the classification that, like, I guess light horror.
Horrific things happen.
Like how much horrificness.
What has that sense of, like you said, I don't know, that where an American Crime was on this map, Deliverance was on here, and some of those movies feel like they're more crime movies or thrillers that have some horrific elements to them. This, at least by the trailer, feels like it's that kind of movie where maybe they weren't sure what to put in South Dakota, so they put in Badlands, just like they put Deliverance, I think it was in South Carolina, if I remember right on the map. But yeah, this doesn't feel like a horror movie, but I'm sure there's probably some elements, some scenes in their getaway as they're, trying to stay ahead of the sheriffs that seemingly, at least again by the trailer, are going after them. They probably do some really bad, horrific things to people in gas stations and in places as they're trying to just stay ahead of the law. But is it a horror movie? Probably not. But it's one of those movies. I didn't know it was Terrence Malick, so there's some that's some credibility. I mean, he is a director that's known for being more of a legit director than what I would have thought is, some throwaway 60s director that just made something with a young Martin Sheen.
And the storytelling in it, I do have to say the pacing I thought was pretty slow, but it did feel like more of a modern way to lay out the story and to follow the characters. And so I could definitely see it being definitely a stepping stone on how directors craft stories, from when it debuted and it getting those accolades when it came out. I can definitely see that, but I think that there's more examples of these movies that are a lot more recent, that definitely expand on the terror part, the horror aspect.
And I'm wondering, the trailer at least reminded me of Sam Peckinpah, who directed Stray Dogs and The Wild Bunch. So it does have that that kind of like 60s. It certainly wasn't optimism. I'm not sure what to call it, but there was this sense of rebellion and uncertainty in society. And you can feel that. That's palpable in the trailer, where there is this sense of, I don't know, a lack of safety. And I'm sure you have, at the same time, civil rights unrest. You have I'm not sure when Woodstock happened, but, you have the idea of like Easy Rider, where you do have this sense of like rebellion and trying to be free and trying to get away from, the suburban increase. And, you're supposed to have a white picket fence, but then you have Peter Fonda on the back of his motorcycle riding across America to try to find the last little bit of freedom that are out there. So that felt like there were elements of that in this movie, at least, that I was piecing together.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was early 70s. So yeah, like you're saying, Bernie, like you're coming off of the civil rights movement, you're coming off of a lot of assassinations in America, and you're coming towards the end of Vietnam. So I think there was a lot of disillusionment in the country at that time. So I think that started to really show in a lot of those. I mean, I guess Terrence Malick you would consider like an auteur director. So I think you're seeing that in a lot of those 70s directors, kind of just trying to channel that, I'll drop my vocabulary word of the day, that anomie that was, I guess, maybe, unsettling in the country at the time. I promise this will be the most erudite that I will be in this entire podcast. So nonsense.
You just said erudite, Pete. I think you just won Jeopardy twice. Congratulations.
I'm just throwing out words at this point. Whatever jumps into my brain, I'll just toss it out there.
Hey, that's okay. That's a perfect transition to a movie that is going to have us talking a lot. That is maybe the polar opposite of Badlands, as we go into North Dakota. And I don't know if you guys are ready for this one, but I think we're all going to have at least a few things to say about the classic, the one, the first, the only Leprechaun. Andrew, we've mentioned this before early on in our legs. I think you said that you are a big fan of this series, that you're also specifically a fan of Leprechaun 4. I think that's Leprechaun in Space, before he goes to the hood. I think, yeah, before he goes to the hood and then back to the hood. I think those are two movies, but this is the one that started it all. So Andrew, kick it off, a little discussion about our friend Leprechaun.
So I might talk about this movie in very really good light. It's not a good movie, but it's one of those, distinct classifications, I feel, that are like good, bad horror movies that, I'm a big champion of the genre of, B horror. And so, John C. Reilly and Jennifer Aniston star in this about a leprechaun who appears in North Dakota, where you would normally see leprechauns. And this is the most, I guess, based in reality one of the entire series. And it's been a while since I've seen the first one, because the Leprechaun series has always been pretty high gore, pretty unique killings, like the kind of killings that you would see in, Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, really impactful, high impact, high effect kills. But you have this character that's really just kind of like a parody of killers. He's talking in riddles and rhymes. I think played by Warwick Davis. So excellent actor for, fantasy and horror and sci-fi. And he really just kind of goes all out. Not once do you not believe that this is a leprechaun. And then sorry, I might be hoarding the mic at this point, but yeah, just the rest of the series. The 3, when they go to Las Vegas, I'm a big fan of when he takes over a magic show and saws a woman in half on stage. That one's classic. And then Space, it's probably the first sequel in space horror movie that I've seen, which is a very distinct title. And it's terrible. It is legitimately an awful movie when you get to space, but there's something still that, when with the right mindset, it captivates you, and you watch it on, TBS at 2 a.m. and watch through all the hearing aid commercials and still get to the very end.
All right, Pete, now that Andrew's waxed poetically about Leprechaun, rightfully so, it's not a great movie, but I think in the podcast that you've done in the past, So Bad you've talked about awful earnestness. And I've always loved that phrase that you and John, your co-host, have used, because you can't go into something to make a cult classic. There is no secret formula to purposely make one. It just kind of happens. And I think that Andrew's kind of hitting it on the head here. This is a movie that I think by all accounts was initially made to be serious. It was not meant to have this satire, this comedic tone. And I'm not sure if this came before or after Nightmare on Elm Street. So if it was inspired by the comedic elements that Freddy brought to that series, compared to the more stoic killers in Michael Myers and Jason. But do you remember the first time you saw this, Pete? And do you have any fond memories of Leprechaun?
I do remember the first time I saw it, because it's the only time that I saw it. This was a very distinct rental from Blockbuster with a couple of friends, and and maybe my brother was involved too. But I definitely remember, okay, let's give this one a try, and thinking that it was kind of meh, it's yeah, no. I think even the first one is listed as a horror comedy, but I don't remember that comedy being I'm frozen again.
We can
yeah, you're frozen, but your audio is good.
Can you hear me? All right. Apparently, someone doesn't want me to talk about Leprechaun, so it's probably Warwick Davis. But yeah, I mean, I never got the comedy part watching the first one, but it's been a long time since I've seen it. Like I think literally we rented this as it was like first run at Blockbuster, so it was early to mid '90s, and I haven't seen it since. I definitely remember it for Jennifer Aniston, if not, or one of her first roles, just because my suite mates in college loved Days of Our Lives, and her father was on Days of Our Lives. So it was like, oh, like, well, his daughter's in this movie Leprechaun. So I'm like, all right, well, check that out. But yeah, I've never seen any of the sequels other than I know that they exist. Leprechaun in the Hood, which I don't know, was that the third one or fifth one? Was that after Space or before Space, Andrew?
I think it was after Space.
Yeah, it was after Space.
So clearly this Leprechaun gets around, but yeah, as far as like the earnest awfulness, I might be interested now that I'm older to check out some of these because they sound like really right up my alley for like just terrible movies that I would probably find wildly entertaining. At the time, after seeing the first one and thinking that it was like, okay, so this was an attempt at making a Leprechaun an evil figure. I'm like, I thought it was serviceable, but it clearly did not really resonate with me all that much to want to see any of the sequels.
I think they did try full horror for the first one, you're right, and then realized people were laughing when they were watching it, and so they added the comedy tab, and then all the other ones had more. The second one I think had like a good handful of comedy, and then 3 and beyond were just outlandish. Although I haven't seen the reboot.
I've seen the first one because now there's been 2 reboots.
The Leprechaun just like?
Oh, sorry. I've seen the first. There's been 2 reboots. I want to say it's Leprechaun Origins and then Leprechaun Returns. What was disappointing about the reboot is that they lost some of the comedy. They were going for something that felt more like an episode of Supernatural. If you guys have seen that show, where they would do the Wendigo, but they would try, outside of the brothers, the Winchesters, they would try to create these sort of 1-hour movies that dealt with urban legends. And when I saw Leprechaun, the Origins, the reboot, it felt like, oh, if you threw in the Winchester brothers, this is how an episode of Supernatural would be, because it didn't have any of the comedic elements that Warwick Davis brought to this. I think, maybe they just realized eventually they understood the lane that they were in, and they just fully embraced the fact that this is what audiences are doing. They're laughing, they're cracking up at this. And if we are a little bit more tongue in cheek in the making of these movies, then screw it. We'll just lean into that. And then I've never seen the one in Vegas, but I saw the preview for this. And Andrew, the scene where he does cut the guy in half with a chainsaw, that looks hilarious. There's a lot of things that I'm like, yeah, you put this character in Vegas and hilarity ensues. You put him in space, in the Hood, it makes sense. You try to do it a little bit more straight-laced, and that earnest awfulness is gone. Like, it's just not as funny anymore.
Yeah, I think that's why I don't love the Sharknado movies all that much, because it's so obvious what they're trying to do. And and God bless them, there's an audience for it, so great. Like, make Sharknado 17 or however far you want to go. But like, those aren't the movies that resonate me. It's the ones that are really trying to make something good. And as we've talked about many times, Bernie, but something goes awry and it's not good, but yet it's still completely watchable and just fascinating on its own merit. So that's the stuff that I love.
That's the secret formula for a cult movie, right? You go in there trying to make Manos the Hands of Fate, and then you end up making something that is perfect fodder for Mystery Science Theater, but has now, arguably because of Mystery Science Theater, found like this fan base that is aware of the movie. The only reason I can tell you about Manos is because of Mystery Science Theater, but the only reason they probably loved it and wanted to riff it is because they saw it and said, these guys thought they were making a real movie, like a good movie, and they put their heart, blood, sweat, and tears into it. And the final product is a little laughable, but you have to have some admiration for what they were trying to do. And, I think that's where, if you have that, that's great. That's how these movies become so memorable for us.
Yeah, they bring a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not in the way that they were intended when they were created, but I mean, it's something to be said for it.
All right, so let's go to a state and a movie that may not bring our audience a lot of joy, because I don't know if any of us have seen this. We're moving to Montana. We're going a little west, young man, and we're going to go to Montana to see pregnant pause. Whew, this is going to be a rough one. Alien Abduction, subtitle, Incident in Lake County. Andrew?
I have not seen this one. I've done my due diligence and my research, and I can't even find listings for it. I don't think it exists.
It's been abducted.
Pete, have you seen this one? Heard of this one?
No, but I will say I've got a serious issue just with the title alone. I feel like calling it an incident in Lake County, like the incident is that there's an alien abduction. So you don't need to say incident. You just alien abduction in Lake County and done. You're set. So,
Well, we don't know that yet. Maybe there's two things that happen. Maybe the 10 killer goes up.
He made his way up to Montana, and little did we know that Terra 10 killer would rear its ugly head. So
this
I
is
think
true. Yeah,
inspired by you. Oh, sorry, Pete, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I realize I'm flying off the handle without knowing all the details, which, I don't like to do. So I appreciate you guys reining me in a little bit, but that, but off the surface, I'm like, I haven't heard of this movie, and who the hell was in charge of coming up with the title on this, because they need some copy editing.
So Andrew, I was inspired by you, since you've been maybe too diligent in doing homework and actually watching some of these movies before we record these episodes. So I did see a making of, like a review on YouTube about this movie. And I actually have some things to say about this, not having seen the movie, but I think something that we can talk about, because there is some connective tissue here. So this movie was one of the predecessors to Blair Witch. So it was a found footage movie that the director was trying to document an alien abduction in that news journalistic found footage type of way. And he made a movie, and it was a bit more dramatic than he wanted it to be. So he essentially remade his own movie. And that's what Alien Abduction Incident in Lake County is. And in making that movie, it actually takes place during Thanksgiving, where an entire family is coming together. And, you have all the dynamics of a family coming in to have Thanksgiving, when all of a sudden there are creepy lights and potentially aliens outside. And I don't know, there's this scene that feels like M. Night Shyamalan was very much inspired in the movie Signs, because you see a quick shot of what's supposed to be a gray man kind of walking outside of a window that, at least from the little making of that I saw, looked genuinely creepy. So I think there's something probably to be said about this. And the person who was reviewing it, Andrew, made the same comment. They were only able to find the movie in some sort of like Craigslisting, like with Spanish subtitles on it. So he was apologetic for the fact that his review contained Spanish caption on there. But it seems like it's a movie that, from the pieces I saw, is honest to the found footage idea that you're basically documenting a family arguing at Thanksgiving, and then creepy lights happen, lights go off, shadiness happens, it could be aliens, and then an alien happens. The ending was kind of interesting, if not anticlimactic. Again, I'm not at all promoting that you guys should watch this. Like, we should all go watch Near Dark first before we even see Alien Abduction. But there was something kind of interesting about it, and it did air on UPN. So it was one of the initial outings, I guess, by the UPN network when they were a fledgling channel and they were trying to get content. And the only thing that was kind of interesting to me about that is, I remember when Blair Witch came out and how big of a pop culture phenomenon that was. And the Sci-Fi Channel did have like a 1-hour documentary that was that right before. And the idea was to further reinforce the fact that this was supposed to be a real event, and just keep feeding this publicity about how, well, this could have happened. Weren't they actors? Well, we're not sure. It just keeps feeding this marketing beast. So that reminded me that, all right, well, UPN, either they were, before that all happened, they were on the forefront of doing something similar with Alien Abduction. So kind of interesting. And that's probably as much as we should talk about Alien Abduction ever on a podcast.
You've talked me into this movie. I will. It's feeding my neuroses that I can't find it, and that it sounds so intriguing. I'm gonna have to go to like one of those back alley film places and like 8mm to try to find among all the like snuff films.
And
If any
Nicolas
of
Cage.
our dozens of Fan2Fan Podcast fans have seen or know more about this, please hit us up. Bernie, where can they find us? They can find us on the interwebs, right?
Fanpodcast.com. I don't know that any of us are willing to pay Andrew money for an out-of-print copy of a like DivX version of Alien Abduction, or maybe even a VCD on eBay for $100, having been released in some sort of like Asian black market. But you know, I'll drop a few bucks for
region free.
That's right. I'll drop a few bucks for a version of this, because Andrew, same thing. It kind of, I don't know, it sounds kind of interesting. I don't think it's going to be good, but I would pay a few bucks to watch it. If I saw it in some sort of a comic convention discount bin for a few bucks, now knowing what it is, I'd part ways with $5 or $6 for it.
It was distributed by Paramount Home Entertainment, so you could always give Paramount a ring and see like, hey, what, you guys got this laying around in a closet somewhere?
Right. And with the popularity now of streaming services and Paramount Plus, if they need content, maybe we should be the people reaching out to them and saying, you guys should do a premiere series on Paramount Plus, starring Kevin Costner, you know, maybe as like an offshoot or a spinoff to Yellowstone, you know, the Alien Abduction in Lake County.
Absolutely. Paramount, if you're listening, please release this, a new theatrical release, or just send it straight to the CW.
A good reimagining with a young cast. Come on. Alien Abduction, Incident in Lake County. There we go. Doug, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on? You guys stopping for gas? I figured I'd jump in the back in the RV. How's the road trip been?
Oh, geez. We thought you were sleeping in the back. We didn't realize you actually completely fell out of the van.
Yeah, I've been chasing you guys for about 3 or 4 states now, so I appreciate you guys finally running out of gas.
And we were so busy talking about a bunch of movies that the three of us have not watched. My foot was on the gas, the pedal was down, and we were just you know, trying to get through some of these states. So I don't know that you missed much, but the three of us certainly have, because there's been some movies that we have not seen. And Doug, I know you're not necessarily the biggest horror aficionado, so I don't think that you would have clarified anything for Near Dark, Children of the Corn, Badlands, Leprechaun, or Alien Abduction, June Incident in Lake County.
The funny thing is, I actually wrote a paper in school about Alien Abduction. So if you want me to go ahead, I can grab it and read the whole thing. It's only about 12 pages. But I actually broke this movie down frame by frame. You know, it was a film study class, and I needed it to pass. So I've actually got very, very serious thoughts and feelings about this movie that you guys have been bashing for the last 5 or 10 minutes.
We'll
I
be
feel
sure
that
to we'll tack the PDF of that into the show notes.
it merits its own discussion. We should do that.
Yeah, we'll do a whole separate podcast for Alien Abductions, as I like to call it, the McPherson tape, because that was its found name, because it was a that whole found footage type thing. No, actually, I have no idea what this movie.
Next to each other states there. I don't know. There's something going on the border of Canada that we might need to check out.
Did I hop back in? Are we heading south from Alien Abduction?
We're heading south. So Doug, I'm handing off the driving reins back to you, because you've been driving the RV, and I think we're going to have an encounter.
All right. Yeah, I could have sworn I took the keys with me when I went to the bathroom, but apparently I didn't, and Bernie got a hold of them. So now that I'm back,
we can hotwire this thing.
Now that I'm back in the driver's seat, we're going to get it on cruise control, and we're going to make our way through Wyoming. Again, this is another one that we're going to argue, probably not. I think we're all on the same page here. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, not a horror movie in any way, shape, or form. Great movie, not a great horror movie. Great alien movie, great sci-fi movie, great suspense movie, but not a horror movie. So Pete, you're nodding. I'm seeing your head going up and down. Why don't you start us off with your Close Encounters, not a horror movie diatribe?
I concur. Yes, it is certainly not a horror movie. It's probably one of Steven Spielberg's most personal movies, and certainly a classic of his. And when I was younger, I don't think I appreciated it as much as when I saw it re-released. I don't know if it was re-released. I saw it in Boston. It was screened at the Coolidge Corner Theater. So I got to see it in the theater again. Well, not again, first time. I didn't see it in the theater when I was younger. And I appreciate it that much more because I hadn't seen it in many, many years. And so it's a very interesting film. I think Spielberg himself has said, like, if he were to have made it when he was older and not at the age that he did, he probably would not have had the Richard Dreyfuss character be as horrible to his family as he was for a good portion of the movie. But yeah, I mean, it's got so much going for it. I mean, that sense of wonder. There's just it works on so many levels. It's a great film, but not a horror film. So yeah, I don't know what else took place in that state.
I'm looking on in Wyoming, and unless we want to throw Beavis and Butthead Do America in its place, I don't, or the House Bunny. I don't really know that Wyoming has a horror film. I mean, it's got some great films. It's got Any Which Way You Can. It's got Ready to Rumble. What else is Meet the Deedles? But really, no horror is jumping out. So I think it was a default. If anybody else has anything that's sticking out in their mind, you got Unforgiven, one of the greatest Westerns of modern times. Cat Ballou, another great Western, but that's Wyoming. Wyoming is the Western.
If we're going to give Wyoming a not a horror movie, I think that Hateful Eight would be a better not a horror movie.
Yeah.
A little bit more suspense, a little bit more, foreboding, a little bit more gore.
If only due to the fact that there's a lot of homages to The Thing in that as well.
Yeah.
And all right. I mean, I can fight for the Hateful Eight. I love that movie.
I did stumble upon a website though, 101.9 King, which I'm guessing is a Western radio station, where they actually had a vote as to what the scariest movie ever set in Wyoming. There was a poll.
Oh, yeah.
And I will give you the list of what won the poll. So what won the poll was a movie called Joyride, which was a Paul Walker film from 2001. That had 36%. Natural Born Killers came in second. Again, I would not consider that a horror movie. That came in second. In third was a movie called Prison, which may have been a horror movie. I don't really know. Yes, it was an 87 horror flick. That came in third. Close Encounters comes in fourth with 12% of the vote. So Starship Troopers also made the list. Not a horror movie. And a movie that I did actually see called Endangered Species, which scared the crap out of me as a kid, because I think it was supposed to be like alien abducted, like, cow mutilations. That was like a thing in the early 80s. And,
oh yeah, I remember those cow mutilation days.
Yeah, like yesterday. Speaking of which, I had a delicious hamburger for dinner, and I got to tell you, it was succulent.
All right, so you know what? Let's move on from this, because as much as we all love Close Encounters, it doesn't fit in this road trip. So,
hey, Doug.
Yeah.
Doug, and then let's just start a new episode with The Shining.
Okay, you ruined it.
Sorry.
This whole podcast just
it's just throw everything out that you guys just did.
Went to hell.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing I'd say about Close Encounters, I've actually never seen it. So.
Really?
Yeah, So if you want to end with that I can give you some good. We start where we began. Movies that we should watch, like Near Dark. Movies that you guys probably think I should watch. Close Encounters.
Yeah, Close Encounters absolutely is a movie that Bernie should watch tonight, in like 5 minutes.
Right now.
That should be like your midnight.
Yeah,
I should watch. I have to watch Near Dark first. That one really just tickled all my fancies.
I think you have to watch
Close
Encounters.
Multiple fancies. That's a revelation of itself.
Also sounds like a horror movie. Tickled fancies. That sounds good.
The villain, the slasher, uses a feather duster with razors on it. I can write this stuff all day.
And a special.
Nice.
All right, and it's got lemon juice on it too, so you squeeze that in there.
That extra sting.
All right, so So here we are. We're gonna wrap up this this episode of our RV road trip of horror across the United States. We finished it off with a not a horror movie with Close Encounters of the Third Kind that we just kind of discovered that Bernie has never seen. So the rest of us will take a vote on whether or not we need to kick him out of the podcast. But you're going to have to stay tuned for the next one, as I believe we're going to be able to finish our road trip on this next episode if I can lock these guys down to 20 minutes or less per movie. So join us next time. We're going to start with a doozy on this next podcast to finish up the RV road trip here at Fan2Fan. We'll see you next time.